Check 1, 2, check, check, check. Final checks, and we're going live. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the one and only the Stadium Pulse. I hope you guys are having a fantastic, wonderful, beautiful Tuesday. It is the 24th of February 2026. We are chipping away at the off season, and there's no better way and there's no better place to be than right here, right now at the Stadium Pulse, a college football show hosted by yours truly, Tegan Randolph. If you've never seen this mustache, this rivalry hat, the pendants behind me, welcome to the show. But nonetheless, let's go ahead and give a little bit of a preview. If you can't read the title, or maybe you didn't look at the thumbnail, you just started clicking at random things, we're going to be talking about two main things here. Number one, I did a thought experiment. Maybe you've seen my face on TikTok. Maybe you've seen my own personal page. I wanted to talk about conference realignment because I think conference realignment could be the root of a lot of the problems within the sport. And we'll dive into that in a little bit more details. And then we'll be doing a top 10 for the head coaches. I know Josh Pate did his. I know Joel Klatt did his. And very similar to some of my other peers in the short form space, we all wanted to try to knock this out. And then, of course, the big names start to do it. So it is a copycat league, especially when we talk about the off season. But nonetheless, that's what we have loaded for you. If you have not been to the show before, welcome once again. It would mean the world if you gave this show an opportunity, whether that's a like, comment, subscribe, anything across the board. Go check to see if you're subscribed. A lot of the analytics say people will watch, but they are not subscribed. I know everyone says that, but it is the truth. You can't argue with data. Facts are facts. So let's keep it pushing, and let's start off today's show with a little bit of conference realignment. College football has so many issues. We all understand this. We all agree to that. It's a flawed sport. Now, how flawed is really where we start to have the conversation, but we can all acknowledge that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution to get it to where the majority of people are going to be happy. It's kind of like superhero movies. Everyone has their own idea or perception of who Spider-Man is and what Spider-Man should look like on the big screen, or the same thing could be said for Batman, Superman, all these different things. So there's not this one-size-all-fits solution when we talk about college football. But what would be a decision that could fix the majority of problems? And I think if we were to look at scheduling and conferences and depicting who is the best from each respective conference, as we have shifted into the year 3 now, I think that's fair to say, of these mega conferences, these bloated conferences. And we've seen some real consequences, some negative side effects from these large expanded conferences like the SEC, and then really with the Big Ten as well, where they're at 16, 18 teams. And from each team respectively, there's a lot of parity, or I would say variance, in what's a really difficult schedule and what's a very easy schedule. I mean, just look at Florida versus Texas A&M. It's apples and oranges in terms of level of difficulty. And frankly, you could attest that to maybe the program's completely fallen off a cliff. You had projected maybe Auburn or Florida to step up. We could go into the nuances of scheduling, but you know what's a difficult one. Florida had a really difficult one, and A&M had a lighter schedule. And partially due to the fact that there are so many teams And it's not like you have a 12-game schedule and you're only playing conference teams. You have a non-conference schedule. You have your cupcakes, and you have the SEC that's only playing 8 conference games. As of this season, it will be 9, and the same thing can be said for the Big Ten. You're not going to be able to play everybody. So there's this crazy variance in scheduling, which presents a lot of challenges when we get to college football playoff and you have to go to the at-large teams and you have to see, is this 11-1 team really that good, or is this 10-2 team that went through a gauntlet of a schedule? I think of Texas this past year. Should they get the benefit of the doubt? Cutting down the expanded conferences would fix so many of the issues. So I did a little bit of a thought experiment where I started writing down what would be my ideal power teams, my power conferences. We're not focused on the group of 5, because if we go down that rabbit hole of why I think the group of 5 should have their own playoff, why I think they should be on their own division, we'll be here all day. I'm focused on the power 4, really the power 2 at this point, but we have to include the Big 10 or the Big 12 and the ACC, even though we can all acknowledge that the Big 10 and the SEC are on a different level. And as I started to write this out, you're going to notice a theme that we're going back to the original conferences, not copy and paste. Like, for example, some of the other ones that you'll see, we're not taking everyone that was part of this conference and placing them in another one. It's a modernized version of it. For example, when we look at the Southwest Conference, and people have already given me this feedback on TikTok. Yeah, it's a lot of Texas teams. Newsflash, Texas has a lot of schools, and football is a big focus in that sport. You're talking to someone that was born and raised in the state of Texas. It's a big deal. So to have a conference that is perfectly curated for just the passion that goes into what I feel like is my home state and the surrounding areas of that. I mean, just look at the 9 teams here, and in a 8-game conference schedule, you play everybody, and you would be able to get a very clear depiction of the hierarchy of these teams. And look at the attached strings across the board. I mean, A&M has rivalries with Texas, Arkansas, a little bit with Texas Tech and Oklahoma, but they have strings attached to all of these teams, Texas included. You could point to all of the higher, like the teams like Texas, who has been able to scale up in the 2020s. Texas Tech has been tenfold scaled up and has become the dominant force within the Big 12. TCU made a national championship this decade. SMU made a college football playoff. Oklahoma made a college football playoff. Oklahoma State, I believe, won the Big 12 in the 2020s. They didn't make the college football playoff because it was only 4 teams. And then Arkansas would be the bottom feeder here. But we could even point to Houston, who has invested time and time again with their respective football program. And this would be the perfect conference to truthfully get a clear depiction of who is the best of the best. And that's the important fact of this, is there would be no question of what's a difficult schedule, what's not a difficult schedule. I mean, we could point to maybe the non-conferencing, of course, but to really crown a conference champion, you would know exactly who the top 2 teams were because they played everybody. We could even point to the Big 10. Now, in all honesty, as I was writing this out, I had to be completely honest and say this is fantasy. What is, the Stadium Pulse or Tegan's perfect college football world? In my perfect college football world, Notre Dame joins the schedule. We have to talk about the big golden helmet elephant in the entire room in the second column. Notre Dame, in my opinion, if you were deciding between the ACC or the Big 10, I'm leaning towards the Big 10. That's because from my perspective, when we talk about what aligns with the values of the Big 10, to me, it feels like Notre Dame fits in with the standard that is Big 10 football. They're in the state of Indiana. They would be with Indiana. They have strong ties against Ohio State and all these other programs. It just feels right. And then you throw in the extra caveat that when we were trying to build out the ACC, it was a larger conference, very much like the Big 10, and it would have felt like overkill to add Notre Dame in there. Whereas we're taking a Big 10 team out of here. If you've already put the dots together, you know exactly which team I'm talking about, and put Notre Dame in with a lot of the familiar faces that you've known and loved with the Big 10 conference. The SEC, we're going back to the roots. The SEC, when you think of this conference, when you see that logo, maybe with a lighter tint of blue, you know exactly what teams come to mind. And it's not Texas, it's not A&M, it's not Oklahoma. Although great additions to the conference, Missouri included, the forgotten stepchild of the SEC, these teams, these brands, these logos is exactly what you think of when talking about the SEC. We did make one change outside of obviously taking the additional teams out. Georgia Tech was one of those teams in the ACC where I was like, where could I shift some of the larger ACC teams that could live with maybe living in another conference? Clemson came to mind, Florida State came to mind. But for me, Georgia Tech, with the ties to Georgia, just felt right going into the SEC without rocking the boat too much. If we were adding like a big brand like a Clemson and all these different teams to the SEC, it would definitely bolster the conference, but you would kind of lose what was the original feel of the conference. Whereas I think Georgia Tech doesn't rock the boat. Plus, they've made a ton of progression in what their football program looks like. So I think it would be a great addition as well. This is where we throw a curveball. The Big Eight. Now, if you did not know, the Southwest Conference lived for a very long time, and it almost felt like you got the Big Eight here. A lot of the Southwest, as it was beginning to die off, jumped to the Big Eight, and then we got what was the modern day Big 12 for a very long time. Or not the modern day, really the old school Big 12, because nowadays it's more modern. And this is almost kind of the way I looked at it was truthfully, you got a mixed bag. Like you couldn't take away all the teams that had made the jump from the group of five to the power four. I think the only team that's missing here, and truthfully, I'm not saying they shouldn't be here, I just didn't know where to put them, was UCF. I didn't put them in here, frankly, for the fact that it would be just such an anomaly of having. I understand we have BYU and Pitt in the same conference, but then adding a Florida school would have just been way too much of a curveball. But there's so many connective tissue. I've had feedback of people saying that Oklahoma State should have been there, but then you go to the Southwest Conference, and it's already 9 teams. You're going to be cutting it down to 7. You can't do that. You have Kansas State, Missouri and Kansas, Colorado, Nebraska, and there could still be some ties there where maybe we can have Nebraska playing Oklahoma, but then you have West Virginia and Pitt. You still have Iowa State in there. BYU gets thrown in there. I'd be fine if you wanted to maybe say BYU should be an independent if you're going to put Notre Dame as an independent. This is the one that I'm open to the most feedback on, but I really do like having this conference and having the old school Big 12 get split in half like it originally was, because there's just too many teams that if you were to throw them all into one conference, we run into the exact issue that we're trying to solve. The ACC is pretty standard. The only main swap we made here was Maryland. It's a founding member of the ACC. They never feel like a Big Ten team because they're an ACC team at heart. And I think this is just an incredible conference overall. It is a little bit larger, but with the quality of football programs, I think a little bit of a larger conference is completely fine in this instance. And lastly, the one that I have the most emotion towards without it being my favorite schools, the Pac-12. Without Colorado, because I put Colorado in the Big Eight because of their rivalries and ties, and it felt like it matched a little bit more. You would get the blend of the Pac-12 and the Pac-10, the original name. You would get the Pac-11. And in this conference, it's such a damn shame that truthfully we got the best year of its existence during my lifetime, which was 2023, when you had the Michael Penix, Caleb Williams, Utah with Cam Rising, all these different pieces, an incredible year, just for it to just go away and break off, and you get these mega conferences. The death of the Pac-12. What a beautiful logo, by the way. And Pac-12 at night, like all these different things. It is an antithesis of what destroyed college football. I'm not calling it a destroyed sport, but the death of it was really a nail in the coffin of some of what made college football really special to me. And bringing it back here for the Power Six would just make so much sense to the sport of college football. Now, we could talk about what the format of that college football playoff would look like. I'm going to just keep it at a very high level for you guys. With the Power Six, now this is under the fantasy world where there's a group of 5 playoff. So the group of 5 would not get an automatic bid. We could find a way to get them in there, obviously. But this world we're going to work off of, there is not a group of 5 representative. So very simply put, conference championship weekend becomes almost like a play-in. No, it becomes a play-in game to go to the college football playoff. Simply put. And then you grab the champions of each conference, you rank them, go 1 through 6. The top 2 teams get a bye week. More times than not, it's going to be the SEC and the Big Ten. And then you have 3 through 6 go and play, and it's a normal tournament. Very simply put, you don't have this long, drawn-out process of a 24-team playoff. You know exactly who the conference champions are. If you wanted to get the right team to win it, you should have won the game, very simply put, and you keep it. You keep it simple. That's all you have to do. I'm open to feedback, but this is how I would run it if I was the commissioner of college football for whatever reason. So I am open to hearing feedback, and let me know your thoughts. But we have to talk about coaches. We have to talk about coach rankings. This was tough. I got to be so honest with you guys. This was a very difficult list to make. I've never felt more, I wouldn't say disgusted. I feel disgusted is too harsh of a way of saying it. Not confident. Very simply put, I'm not confident in this list. The criteria I set, it's just so difficult. But we can dive in. Ranking head coaches is very, very difficult, especially in college football. There's so much criteria that you have to bake into it. You can't just look at wins and losses and truly say that this guy has the most wins and that's why he's the best. Or you can't look at Kurt Cignetti and say he had the greatest turnaround in college football history and that automatically makes him the best. Although that's a better argument than the one that I just said prior. But there's more to that. A college football coach, their list of responsibilities is a longer list than ever. And it's just so draining. Like, truly understand, it is nonstop. There's not a single break. Not to say there's a break in the NFL, but there's at least some breathing, some areas to breathe. In college football, it is full gas, no breaks. While you are playing the season, you have to build up a staff that's capable of churning and preparing and acquiring talent for your future years. All the meanwhile, the calendar is completely broken. So ranking is very, very difficult. So what is the criteria that I based my top 10 rankings on? I have a long list of honorable mentions, and we'll walk it through relatively quickly. We've got about 12 minutes to do so, or however long this segment is if you're watching after the fact and not the live show. The first thing we have to talk about is what is the scale? What is the timelines that we're working off of? Some people like a rolling 3-year period, which is understandable. You have to adapt and change your rankings as you get more information while also being able to hold or let go of older information. Like, I can't hold on to what Dabo Swinney did in the 2010s because it's a completely different college football. You can't just look at what he was able to build with those rosters because you can't really do that in 2026. But you also have to respect the pedigree in what he's been able to do in recent years. Spoiler alert, Dabo Swinney's not in the top 10. He didn't even make the honorable mentions list. Or you could do 5 years, which I think is stretching it because of the quick changes that the sport has been throwing at these coaches. So to me, I stuck with about a 3 to 4 year period. I lean towards 4 because that's the cycle of a traditional collegiate student athlete that is not going to the NFL. But I'm open to, if you were to say it's a 2-year rolling period because of all the changes. Talent acquisition is something that needs to be baked into your criteria. Can you bring in the best of the best? Can you be able to develop the best of the best? Talent acquisition is one of those things where a lot of college football fans have a lot of hot takes about it, where it says, the stars don't matter, or recruiting's overrated, the portal's overrated, all these different little things. At the end of the day, your job as a head coach, outside of winning football games, obviously, is to be able to equip yourself with as many tools in the basket as possible, and that is talent acquisition. You can talk to me about recruiting rankings and those websites and everything underneath the sun. I get you. It doesn't help my case that Indiana basically broke the mold of blue chip ratio, which is the 4 and 5 stars that are within the roster and being able to go 16-0. I understand that. And very similarly put with a lot of Cinderellas, people will take the anomaly, grab onto it for dear life, and tell you that's possible because this happened. More times than not, you need to be able to acquire talent that is high quality, and more times than not, those recruiting websites are fairly accurate in terms of depicting who are some of the top end guys. It's their jobs to do that. We could go back and forth on that, but talent acquisition shouldn't be debated as a criteria for head coaches. And then being able to hire the correct staff. This is something that I think needs to be talked about more. The churn of offensive and defensive coordinators and being able to maximize the next guy was what I feel made Nick Saban such a damn good coach. There's so many reasons why Nick is the greatest coach of all time in college football, at the bare minimum in my lifetime. But truthfully, I think he's the GOAT of the sport. And part of that is because he was always able to replenish the talented coordinators that would go to coaching rehab at Alabama and go off to their next successful spot because all they did was win. He was able to replenish that with another guy that was ready and good and being able to maximize the talent on the field. And you saw at the end of his tenure, he wasn't able to do that. And he had to start firing and replacing guys because it's a very difficult thing to do. And it's a very difficult thing to master. I got to shout out like Ryan Day for it. Kirby Smart, I think, does a damn good job of it. And it's one of my big question marks for Cignetti is what is that going to look like when these top end assistants leave? Are you going to be able to replace them? That's a question mark. And then the last thing, which I would almost have is like a cherry on top. It's not a necessity because I don't think you need this to win football games. Do you provide a schematic edge? Like Kirby Smart provides so much defensive insight, very much like Nick Saban. He was skilled in coaching defense. That was his MO. That's what he is damn good at. Some coaches are just program builders and culture builders and talent evaluators. That's completely fine. But I think if you provide a schematic edge at the top position, I may favor you over some other guys. But it's a melting pot of different ingredients to evaluate a coach. So let's talk about the honorable mentions. We've talked about the criteria long enough. Kalen DeBoer wanted him to be on the top 10. I really did. Because I defend Kalen DeBoer a lot on this channel. Josh Heupel needs to be in these conversations almost to remind volunteer fans that they have a damn good coach and they need to be okay with that. Because the notion that there's volunteer fans that want him fired is egregious to me. Jed Fish, one of the most underrated coaches in all America, was a real contender for that Michigan job, has done fantastic work at Arizona, and has done fantastic work at Washington. Jed Fish, easily one of the most underrated coaches in all of America. Lincoln Riley, I don't think he's a serious contender to be in the top 10, but because of his pedigree, I think he should be respected in this conversation. But obviously the winning at USC has not been at the expectation level. So I just want to give him a shout, but I don't think he was a real contender to be in the top 10. Joey McGuire, I think, is a ascending coach. I think obviously as the program rises, I think the respect for a guy like Joey McGuire to be able to do it at Texas Tech. A lot of people may talk about how he just has a blank check and he could just go pay all these different guys. Well, you can have all the tools in the toolbox, but if you're not able to actually utilize it, I mean, a la Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher, none of it matters. And then Kenny Dillingham. He was one of the top coaches for the Michigan job that people were saying, if they're able to get that guy, it's over. And I think if that's the candidate that we're talking about and what he's been able to do at Arizona State has been just outright remarkable, I think he's easily in the conversation. And I really wanted to push him into that top 10 range, but I couldn't find enough room for him. But at number 10, we have Mike Elko. Mike Elko, in 2 years with Texas A&M, has been absolutely remarkable. We could talk about the schedule, the narratives. I get it. There's a lot of things that people say about A&M. And you see the Reveille hat. You see the pennant behind me. You could call me biased. Even Kyle Field right here. You could point to all these different things. At the end of the day, he has been able to do things that hasn't been able to be done at A&M with all the resources that they have at their disposal. And that's what should be very exciting for a coach of this caliber. And he has a proven track record, not just at A&M, but also at Duke, of maximizing talent. Now he's bringing in an incredible amount of talent, leading one of the best transfer portals, one of the best recruiting cycles. And there's so much that you have to like with him also being the head guy for the defense. I mean, he basically is playing defensive coordinator, calling plays this past season, and the defense took a major step forward. So he checks off a ton of boxes outside of the longevity at A&M, but if you bake in his time at Duke, it was also playing at a very high level. So I think Mike Elko easily has a case at the bare minimum to be at 10, but with him being at 10, I can hear so many different arguments for all the guys I mentioned in the honorable mentions. Kyle Whittingham, I have at 9. Got to respect the old man. He is so damn good. And what he was able to get out of Utah for such a long time doesn't get talked about enough. And I'm glad that for most media members, now that he's wearing the big M and a big blue and everything, he's getting so much more respect. I've been a Utah guy for a very, very long time. I was a huge fan of them going into this year. They didn't obviously meet my expectations because I had them winning the Big 12, but they were a damn good football team because Kyle Whittingham teams, you know exactly what you're getting, and it's a damn good football program with an identity and a culture, and he checks off so many of these boxes, and I think he is easily a top 10 coach at bare minimum contention. Steve Sarkisian, I have number 8. Talent acquisition is off the charts. One of the best talent factories in all of America with Texas. He brings a huge schematic edge offensively calling plays. Some people may question on whether or not that's a good thing. I think my big question for him, and it's a huge risk going into this year, is did you hire the right staff? You had a solid defensive coordinator. You moved him away for Will Muschamp. That's a big question mark. And he has been able to get Texas back into the national contention without it just being a preseason notion. It's actual tangible results. And so this season, he could easily find himself all the way at 5, but he is a definitive top 10 coach in the country for where he's been able to get Texas at this point. I believe he's going into year 6, which is crazy to think about. Mario Cristobal, talent acquisition is incredible. I have Mario Cristobal at number 7. He could be higher. I could hear it out. I still have those in the back of my mind, some reservations about what he is as a game day coach, and we didn't really talk about that. Some of his in-game decisions are very much questionable, but it seems like he is a coach that is developing and getting better. That's something that not a lot of people talk about is what has this coach been able to do 3 years from now or 3 years prior to now? He has gotten better. And I think this national championship run is really a depiction of what he's been able to grow and develop into. Plus, he was able to make 2 incredible hires at the offensive and defensive coordinators, absolutely knocked it out of the park. He should get credit for that. And then you bake in the talent acquisition, what he's been able to do, getting a guy like Cam Ward from Washington State, turning him into a Heisman contender, following that year with Carson Beck, getting an incredible transfer quarterback, going to the national championship with a real possibility of winning it. And then this past year, getting Darian Mensah. We'll see how that goes. Number 6, I have Marcus Freeman, another coach that was able to go attend a national championship against Ohio State. And truthfully, it's a respect for what he's been able to get out of Notre Dame. I was of the belief that Notre Dame was kind of capped out in years prior, and it seems like this is now a team that is going to be a force. He's great at talent acquisition. He's great at retaining that talent and developing it, and that's got to be talked about. He's got a defensive schematic edge. He's got a great amount of success, and I think you are just going to see this progression grow and grow. I think he's hired the right staff a couple times and been able to keep that quality from time to time. I know their DC went to, I believe, the Bengals, and this past season it took a little bit for the defense to get going, but it became a big strength, and they have a ton of talent there. Freeman's a damn good coach. Lane Kiffin at number 5. This was the top candidate for a reason. Ole Miss had a damn good coach, and there's a reason why Lane Kiffin is a top 5 coach in the country. Schematic edge, right there. A ton of success. Being able, like, I give him a ton of credit for where Ole Miss got to when talking about the multi 10-win seasons. And then this past year, obviously, you had Pete Golding, but he was able to hire that OC. That was like, I'm of the belief that if Ole Miss was to win that national championship, he should have gotten a ring because his fingerprints and identity was all throughout that roster. So I have Lane Kiffin at number 5. Number 4 is Dan Lanning. I really feel like 4 through 6 or even 4 through 7 is interchangeable. Dan Lanning is just one of those guys that is so young in his career. Have I been critical of him? Yeah. Have I questioned, like, could he lose the big game at the end of the day? And the way that he's left seasons have been really rough. But talent acquisition, the 3-year scale, hiring incredible amounts of staff, replacing Kenny Dillingham with an incredible coach in Will Stein. We'll see, and then the defensive side of the ball as well. We'll see how he's able to, evolve that coaching staff as they are going through a huge change this year. But he's just been incredible, and he's so due for a national championship sooner or later. And lastly, we'll go through these relatively quick. Ryan Day at number 3, Curt Cignetti at number 2, and Kirby Smart at number 1. These are all interchangeable. And frankly, it's hard to put into words why one is above the other. I'll just say this. Ryan Day has a factory built at Ohio State and deserves so much credit for replacing the defensive coordinator and the offensive coordinator with incredible talents and being able to have an incredible staff. And Matt Patricia was seen as a joke for a lot of people, has become one of the best defense coordinators in the entire country. He's been able to win, get a national championship. It is checking every single box you're looking for. This is where I put the caveat of schematic edge. Like, these little hairs that we're having to pull and split, it makes a difference in my opinion. Curt Cignetti, he's got the most crowned achievement in terms of level of difficulty and what he's been able to do as a coach. It's a longevity question. Can he replace the talent that isn't leaving the building now, but probably will over the next couple of years? Can he replace that? What is the scalability of their talent acquisition? All these different things. So I can't definitively say, he is the best coach in college football. Whereas Kirby Smart, I think I get the best of both worlds. Obviously not a recent national championship, but we know about Kirby. We know about Georgia. And this is a program that I think has the best coach in all of college football, and I'm willing to argue on that. So that is my list. Like I said, it's very difficult. So if you have a problem with it, there's a comment section for a reason. I'll see you in there. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching today's show. I will see you guys next time. I believe Thursday, same time. I'll see you then. Peace.